video game music. We're back. I missed you. I loved you. I wanted to fancy you. And guess what? I still do. Well, let's listen to some video game music. What do you say? Do you ever get deja vu? It happens to me every once in a while. I've heard some theories on it. Heard some interesting theories on what it is. But we're not going to get into that right now. We're just going to get into deja vu. Track number 4. Well, that was thought-provoking. It was very deep, very intense, and would you believe it's Virtua Tennis 4? Would you believe? That's a character we heard from on the show not too long ago, and then I'm just now impersonating that character. You know who it is? I bet you don't. You're probably too young, because I'm an old motherfucker. Nah, I'm not that old. But anyway, Virtua Tennis 4. And before that, we had Gradius 3, the arcade. Now, that song, it may have seemed like I played it for longer than I should have, but the thing that you may not have noticed is that it's a unique situation that doesn't happen very often, or didn't. Probably never fucking happens these days, because the music on video games is, well, it's just music. It's not programmed in. Every time the song repeats, it goes up a step, one note. So it gets to where it's fairly high-pitched. I cut it off. I didn't let it go all the way. It went on for longer than what I played, but I figured, it might have been a little bit boring. There's a song on, I think, 720, the arcade, the 720 Degrees skateboarding arcade game by Atari. A song like that keeps repeating and going up a step, and it literally does not stop if you just sit there and listen to it. Or if you emulate it and you speed it up, you cut to the chase, it gets to where it just sounds like a cassette tape on fast forward where you can hear it. You know, the generic thing they would do in movies or TV shows that me and my brother always thought was annoying because it wasn't realistic. Like on a regular tape recorder or player or, you know, tape deck, when you fast forwarded, you didn't hear the audio unless you were trying to. Like if you had play and fast forward pressed down at the same time, maybe. But in the context of these movies or shows, it was just like, oh, it's a given when you rewind or fast forward a tape, you hear everything at that speed at the time. No, you didn't. That's not accurate, you motherfuckers. You dumb motherfuckers. Anyway. Before Gradius 3, we had Euphoria, the Saga. Euphoria, spelled U-F-O-U-R-I-A. I guess it involves the number 4, I guess, or something like that. It's a Sunsoft game, as you could tell by the sound of it. Really great music. They always, well, not always, but usually produced for Nintendo games. And that brings you up to date. How about our weekly Wise? Want to hear some David Wise? At least I think it's him, because he did the soundtrack with some gal. Some of the music is his and some isn't. Kudos to her, because it's hard to distinguish, really. But here's a song from DKC3, Donkey Kong Country 3 for not Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance. Oh, and the interesting thing about this, I think, is, alright, well, scratch everything I just said. Dave Wise did do this song because it's the Game Boy Advance version that came out later, and he redid everything, so this is a redo of Aquatic Ambiance, or Ambiance, or Ambiance, or Ambiance. The famous song that you should be familiar with if you're listening to this show. And if you're not, get the fuck out of here. You may have heard an alternate, well, it's not alternate, it's somebody made a song that sounds extremely similar to it, and I often hear it used on Instagram Reels or social media as a background thing. And it's like very obvious somebody is just ripping off Aquatic Ambiance. Anyway, here's Dave Wise is ripping off of his own song on Game Boy Advance for Donkey Kong 3. Waterworld. No Kevin Costner in this, unless you just want to imagine that he's in it. Here we go. If I can click it properly. I have a clicking problem. heard some Black Tiger arcade game. That's the only form it's in. Arcade. Kind of crazy because... Oh, I got a bubble in my throat. Can you hear that bubble in my throat, Hannah? Oh. Okay, I swallowed that bubble. That'll be coming back to haunt me later. Black Tiger by Capcom. It's a shame that that never went beyond the arcade. It should have been a port. As far as I know, it never was. But it was a fucking great game. I owned that arcade board and artwork. I don't know if it existed as its own dedicated machine or if it was just released as a conversion kit by Capcom, because that was very common. But great game, and I've babbled about it in previous episodes, so I won't do it again. But you know, it's one of those, it's like a platform. There's a brief period in arcade game history, the mid to late 80s, mainly late, where they had these platform games that were like Nintendo games, but you were playing it on an arcade machine and had the benefit of the graphics and the sound and everything. And if you were good at it, in theory, you could, you know, play through the whole game and on one quarter. And at a certain point, probably around 1989 or so, someone had the bright idea that, you know, we could just make this game. We don't have to try so hard. Let's just make the game really difficult, where you die a lot and you gotta keep putting quarters in, and, you know, everyone makes money. Anyway, Black Tiger is one of those platformer games that it was a lot of fun for me to own it as an arcade game because it was still challenging. There were checkpoints on it when you die. So, you know, when you continue, you don't start out right exactly where you died. You go back to the checkpoint. And that makes for a great game, you know. It's like Rastan or Shinobi. There's not a lot of them in that category, really. But that's a few I've named here. Unlike Rastan and Shinobi, though, if I recall correctly, Black Tiger, you get to the final stage, and you can keep continuing. Rastan and Shinobi, you get one shot at it. Once you're on the final stage, there's no continuing anymore. I don't care how many fucking quarters you got. And, you know, kudos to them for that also, because that made it challenging, and it didn't mean the person with the most money wins. Because that's not how things should be, you know? Well, I think that brings us up to date, right? Wait, no, it doesn't. Black Tiger, followed by Overdrive. And the name of that track was Funky Guy, and that was a Konami arcade. That was by the Konami House Band, whatever the fuck they're called. The Konami... That's me not attempting to read or pronounce the Japanese name of the band. Not that I don't respect them quite a bit. And then after that, you should recognize that song that we just heard, Mustard. It's a game that you're looking at if you're watching this on YouTube. Paperboy Arcade by the aforementioned Atari company. And you know what? Recently, in the last couple of weeks, I have felt quite a bit like the gentleman who has unwittingly begun an app on the lawn, the front lawn of that house. But, not right now. Eh? Paperboy, classic, arcade. It's good to hear that song, just, it's good to just listen to that song sometimes. It just gets you going. Get you going to the bathroom. Well, not the bathroom. It gets me going to Luby's. Because they have unlimited lobster tail. It's not real lobster tail. It's fake, but it's hey, it's inexpensive, so well, let's keep things going. Let's hear some music from a game. A game that I played many years ago. Angry Musicman says, I'm rolling a tire in the street. Yeah. We do that for fun sometimes, don't we? Especially if we see a kid trying to deliver newspapers on his bicycle. We say, hey, let's try to roll a tire out in front of this motherfucker and knock him on his ass. Anyway, there's a gentleman that likes to crack the whip, and he has a theme song, and it originated on Super Nintendo. Actually, this might be from Castlevania 3. So, on Super Castlevania 4, is it Trevor or is it Simon Belmont? If only there was some way I could look this stuff up, or ask my AI assistant when that AI assistant is not busy cupping my balls. Well, here's Theme of Simon from Super Castlevania 4, a classic.
When I'm feeling low, you know what always cheers me up?
Is it love? Kindness?
Ooh, tough room. Video games. What do you got? Billy Graham's Bible Blaster?
Keep firing! Convert the heathens!
Got him!
No, you just winged him and made him a Unitarian. Look out, Bert! The gentle Baha'i!
All right, full conversion. Thanks, guys. This really cheered me up.
Second coming. Reload! Reload!
Can we play now?
You are playing. We're a team.
Yay!
get your data from the East, because that's where I get my data. That game was pretty badass when it came out. I played that a lot at the local arcade. That was Midnight Resistance by Data East. Presented by Data East. And that was the song from track 4, level, I don't know. It's from that game. That was a game where I think when you continued, you started out right where you just were, but it was still pretty fun. Just the in between levels, you would pick your next weapon for the next level. And it also, I think, depended on how many keys you picked up to open the cases of in the arsenal. Arsenal Hall. I like that Arsenal Hall, honey. Anyway, pretty fun game. It came out on Sega Genesis also, and we've heard some from it on this show. Before Midnight Resistance, we had Super Turrican, a Chris Hulsbeck joint. Really good music that Chris Hulsbeck did for that game. I was pretty amazed by it when it came out on Super Nintendo. I mean, it sounds like it's not from Super Nintendo or even a video game, almost. At the time, it sounded like a Pantene Pro V commercial, you know? But, I was very impressed by it. And before that, Champions of Krynn. Battle 2 Final. That's about all I have to say about that. Coming up next. Oh yeah, we got more. There's a game that's been mentioned tonight on the show. Let's hear a song from it. There are not very many songs from it, unfortunately, because the songs that are from it are great. But sometimes that's just the way it is, as Georgia Brawler would say. It's a Taito game. Another one that I owned and played the hell out of that I mentioned earlier. Rastan. Scene 2. Reincarnation, as it says on the file, but I like to call it the dungeon song because that's what it is. Here we go. Well, folks, we're at that point in the show. And, I think we need a song to fill in. This doesn't happen very often. I try to plan so that this doesn't happen, but also it's kind of an exciting thing. So here's a bonus song, and hopefully, god damn it, it doesn't come with an ad that gets played. Of course, all the music on this show I download, process, edit, adjust the bass and treble levels. I try to get everything equal so you can listen to the show and it'll be enjoyable and you don't have to constantly grab your volume knob and yank it off, as they would say back in those disgusting 80s. Here's a song from TMNT. Let's give it a try. Kudos to those Konami composers. That Ninja Turtles arcade game from 1989 that we just heard from had a big effect on my life. Anyway, tonight's episode, or any episode in particular, is not the original intention. Is not for it to be blabbing. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. And we got an end theme we're going to play. And if you enjoy the show, keep tuning in, folks. We do have a Zoom. Well, we use Zoom for the show. We do have a PayPal and a Patreon account, which help us pay for Zoom fees to do the other show on this channel. It's been fun, folks. It's been food, folks, and fun. Just like McDonald's. And we're gonna leave you tonight with a good one. It's a game called Ground Seed. It's for a computer system. Only in Japan, I believe. And we love you a lot. Wanna fancy you. And until next time, don't forget to power up.